الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So the topic for today's discussion, inshallah, is balancing worldly pursuits and religious commitments. And this is something that all of us, or some of us, have faced in our lives. Between our families, between our jobs, and between all of the available problems in the Muslim world today, all of us want to try to deal with those problems or approach them according to our abilities and according to our time. And sometimes balancing those things can become very challenging. We have a Sunday school program, sometimes we have after school programs. There are many programs that help Muslims overseas, there are many programs that help Muslims locally. There are social programs available that are for the Muslims and for the non-Muslims. Many of us want to get involved politically to help the Muslims and to help society in general. So where do we decide and how do we decide at what level and how should I get involved in these different programs? Because we obviously can't do it all. As a whole, as a jama'ah, as a group, as an ummah, yes, we can approach all of these things, but as individuals, when it comes down to me, how is it that I decide what program I should involve myself in, and how do I decide and how I should help? So the first thing that I would like to talk about is the hadith of intention. And this is a hadith that all of us know, and it's a very famous one in the hadith corpus where the Prophet ﷺ said, إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله ومن كانت هجرته للدنيا يصيبها أو امرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. The actions are judged by their intentions. So everyone will be judged on what he intended. Whoever migrates for Allah and His Messenger, then his migration is for them. And whoever migrates for this world or in order to marry a woman, then his journey will be for that intention. In the hadith, like we said, it's one that is very famous. Many, if not all of us, know this hadith. But there are two things that some of us tend to overlook. And why is it that the Prophet ﷺ used the example of hijrah? There are many actions that he could have utilized. He could have used salah, he could have used hajj, he could have used, drinking water. But he used the example of hijrah. Why is that? So I was right in saying that many of us haven't thought about it.
Sacrifice.
The sacrifice that's involved. There's no doubt that there's sacrifice that's involved. But there are other things, right? There are many things. Even making hajj, there's a sacrifice that's involved. Don't say, why specifically the example of hijrah? No, follow.
Was there a specific case of somebody who made hijrah to Medina?
Good. So if there's a specific case, we say that this is something that is relevant to the time, right? So not only was hijrah actively going on, but there was also, Imrat Qais, that there was a man that actually, he traveled to Medina with the specific intention of what? Of marriage, right? That's the only reason he traveled. He traveled, the woman, she made this, Qais, she made it a condition that if you want to marry me, you need to make hijrah. So relevance, there's no doubt about that. The Prophet ﷺ, he used this example because it is something that was currently going on, and it was something that was done, and people recognized this, and people knew this. So that's one reason, the relevance. What else?
It's probably the best deed that the Sahabas could have done at that time. And so the fact that you would do that and still Prophet ﷺ is reminding us about intention. So it's such a huge sacrifice.
The value of the deed? Mashi. Okay. What else?
It's a big change.
Okay. This goes back to the idea of sacrifice. But one of the reasons the Prophet ﷺ mentioned this is because it's a worldly action. And let's think about that for a minute. The hijrah, the migration, is a worldly action. And how do we know that? Just like drinking water, just like going for a jog. How do we know that this is a worldly action?
They made hijrah for the sake of having a better life, so it's just pertaining to your condition at the moment, whether it be your wealth and things like that involved.
That's good, but let's go back to the hadith itself. What did the Prophet ﷺ himself say?
This is like so make calculations for worldly desire. So
okay. that wrong?
No.
No, okay. So if I migrated from here to Pennsylvania, for example, because I had a better job, and my sole intention was to get a better pay, is there anything wrong with that? No, there's
no, the intention is different.
It all goes back to intention. That's why this is the hadith of intention, and that's why this hadith has such value. That's why this is something that we should always ponder over, because the Prophet ﷺ, he gave us the example of this worldly action, saying that yes, you can migrate to have a better life. You can migrate because you want to marry a woman. You can migrate because you want more pay. You can migrate for all of these reasons. But if you want reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that migration, what do you need to do?
Just to have the pleasure of
You have to have the right intention. You have to do it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we think about any worldly action, whatever action that might be, whether it be drinking water, whether it be going for a job, whether it be going to the store and buying a new outfit, whether it be buying a car, whether it be buying a house, whether it be going to meet my friends to play cricket or soccer, that worldly action becomes what? Ibadah. And look at the beauty of the deen. Wallahi, if we really sit and think about it, how amazing this religion is, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us so many opportunities to turn all of these actions into ways to please Him, and it really should be a way to humble us, and to show us how amazing, number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, and how amazing this religion is, and how it's really a blessing on us. Saying that, this shows, and this hadith shows, that it is okay to go and seek worldly pursuits just for the sake of them being worldly pursuits. So if an individual wants to go to a place or move to a place because he can have a better life there, or because he can get a better job or better pay, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And many of us in this room today, we came here to the United States just for these reasons. There are very, very few people in the United States who came here sincerely and solely for the sake of da'wah. Very few. Because there's a huge economic barrier in coming to the United States. I remember one of the brothers that had been mentioned, Sheikh Muhammad Shinawi, was actually talking about, he wanted to go to England because he wanted to see the dynamic of the Muslims there. Because he said Islam had been established in England for a lot longer than it has been established here in the United States. So he talked to one of the mashayikh over there saying that, I came here hoping to see this. He was like, listen, don't compare America to England. And so he said, why not? He said, coming to England, you have the entire strata of society. You have the people who came from the village with absolutely no money, and you had people who were extremely well off. He said, this is not the case in the United States. In the United States, you have that initial economic hurdle, and meaning you had to have a little bit of money in order to come here. You couldn't come here with absolutely nothing. You had to pay visa fees, you had to pay a ticket. There are a number of things that you had to take care of, and there are a number of steps you had to take in order to arrive here. So our biggest fitna, or one of our biggest fitnas, is the fact that most of us are financially stable. And this really does become a hurdle or an obstacle for many of us, if not all of us. And having this love of money is something that is very natural. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَتَحُبُّونَ الْمَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا, that and you have an insatiable love of wealth. In another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, زُيِّنَ النَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ وَالْبَنِينَ وَالْقَنَاطِيرِ الْمُقَنطَرَةِ من الذهب والفضة والخيل المسومة والأنعام والحرث ذلك متاع الحياة الدنيا والله عنده حسن المآب. That the love of desirable things is made alluring for men, women, children, gold and silver treasures piled up high, horses with fine markings, livestock and farmland. These may be the joys of this life, but Allah has the blessed place to return to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says very clearly that this is something that is natural that He's placed in our hearts. Love of this world, love of wealth, love of having children, love of having nice things. And the examples He gives here is of horses and of land. And while this might not be something that we relate to personally, this is something that the Bedouin Arabs, they definitely related to. And if we compared this to our lifestyles today, so if I said to you, having a nice car and having a nice house, this is something very similar. All of us want to have a nice car. Nobody ever makes dua to have a car that say, I have to make dua and, hoping that it'll start every morning. Everybody wants something that they can trust. And most of us, alhamdulillah, even coming here, and wallahi this is a blessing, and sometimes we overlook this, even coming here to the masjid, I think the biggest worry that we had on our minds wasn't, am I going to get shot on the way to the masjid? Is the Secret Service going to come and knock on my door after salah? Is somebody going to pick me up on the way? Am I going to see my family again? Wallahi, the biggest worry we had is, do I have gas in my car or not? Wallahi, this is a blessing. Wallahi, it's an living in such safety, living in such tama'ni. Really, a lot of us are Muslim. And we overlook that, and we're not thankful enough for it. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us and to continue to bless us. So having this love is something that is natural. And Islam didn't come here to completely squash out all of these feelings. It didn't come here to remove these feelings or to deny them. Having love, having happiness, having sadness, having anger, even having a desire for women. This is something Allah placed in our hearts. It's not something that He told us to repress. It's not something He told us to deny. But what He does command us to do is to channel that. Meaning that I cannot get angry to the point where I can strike another person. I cannot get sad to the point where I start screaming and wailing. I cannot get happy to the point, where I grab an ajnabi woman, and I give her a kiss because I'm so happy. These are limits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put on these emotions. Saying that yes, have these emotions. Yes, express them, but make sure you channel them in a correct way. I know you love money. So what are some conditions that I'm going to put for you to get that money? Make sure that the way that you acquire it is halal. Make sure this way that you spend it is halal. And from that money that you save, you have to give zakah. If you fulfill these three conditions, you can have as much money as you can get. There's no limit. For an individual to move up economically, this is something that is definitely desirable. It's not desirable for a Muslim to be poor. But can Muslims be poor? Yes, absolutely. This is sunnatullah. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deals with His creation. Even amongst the companions, you had those who were extremely wealthy, and you had those who were extremely poor. But even the ones that were extremely poor, what did the Prophet ﷺ do for them? And what did the Bayt al-Mal do for them? And what did the other Muslims do for them? They tried to empower them. And from the greatest examples of this is Abu Hurairah. He was from Ashab al-Sufa. What do we know about Ashab al-Sufa? Where did they live? They lived in Masjid al-Nabawi. They lived in the shelter at the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. These were the ones that were receiving the social services. You guys know what his job was? What did he used to do? Anybody know? 2 questions. What was his job, and how long did he spend with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ?
Spent 3 years.
3 years, right? He became Muslim Am Khaybar, which is about the 8th year of Hijrah. He spent 3 years with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he was what was called a Hatib al-Layl, meaning that he would go out at night and he would collect firewood, and then he would sell it in the morning, and that would be enough for him. And there are a few things that sometimes we overlook, saying, oh, look how pious he was, and look how poor he was. Well, did he have a family? No, it's just him. So making those individual sacrifices is something that an individual can make. And he was actually living something comparatively to what we would call a student life. Right? He was making all kinds of sacrifices in order to seek knowledge and graduate from the Madrasat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. to the point that he became the greatest narrator of Islam. And then he went on to become the governor of Bahrain. Now Bahrain at that time was the east coast, basically most of the east coast of modern day Saudi Arabia. And he came back to Umar radiallahu anh once he was appointed governor, and he had cartons and cartons and cartons and wagons of wealth from the zakat and the sadaqah that they were bringing. Just imagine this individual who used to live in the masjid. He lived in the masjid. He lived between the minbar and the house of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, meaning that he knew every time the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam left his house, and he knew every single time that he came home. And this individual came back. Imagine such an individual coming back with wealth in wagons, beyond what many of us can even imagine today. But it didn't change him. He still was who he was. But did he go back to living